Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. This is Reservations, and I'm Jeremy Blair.
And I'm Rain Whalen. So, buddy, I didn't see you at work today.
No, I have just begun my 3 weeks of paternity leave, so I was with Maya all day long.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I would have seen you anyway. We don't work at the same branch.
That's a good point. Nor in the same city, but
no, we've always lived in the same city.
That's right.
Doing this virtually is just a lie that we tell our audience.
I'm just in the next room over.
You know, we were kind of speaking a little bit about conspiracy theories before we got started. So you know Smosh. I got you in the Smosh.
That's right.
Shane and Courtney are married.
That's right.
Ashley and I have found like compilations, on YouTube of some like the best moments and stuff like that. And we're pretty sure that during the shutdown, when Smosh was doing a lot of content over Zoom, I'm pretty sure Shane and Courtney are this when they're living together and they're just pretending, that that Courtney's literally probably just in the other room.
That's fine.
Filming this because they were really private about them dating and But I leaned I don't remember one compilation, but I leaned over to Ashley. I'm like I guarantee you, Shane can hear her in the other room. Well, and then there's one whole episode of the podcast before they rebranded it as Smosh Mouth. It was just called Smoshcast, where it was just Shane and Courtney, and it was virtually. And I'm like, they have to be living together by this point.
They're in the same room. Yeah.
They're in the same room. They're in the shot. No, I love Shane and Courtney. I think it's awesome that they were able to keep that a secret for so long. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
No.
We're here to talk about movies. And before we get into today's episode, last week you talked about some of the things you watched. So I want to talk about one of the things I watched over the weekend, which was Clerks 3. As most of our audience, Zach, knows, I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith, and I think Kevin has had a really good career, almost like a second act of his career with some of his new films, like Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. And I'd heard a lot of great things about Clerks 3. So I was like, all right, I'll eventually watch it. And as I was texting you as I was watching it, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really mature for Kevin, but also very, a lot of dick and fart jokes per Kevin Smith. But it was really good, and I really enjoyed it. Makes me even more excited to see the 4:30 movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully, fingers crossed, Kevin will finally make Twilight of the Mallrats, which is supposed to be like the long-awaited sequel to Mallrats, and it's supposed to be about Brody, Jason Lee's character, about his daughter, and supposedly Kevin's still got the script locked and loaded, although he is having to retool it because R.I.P. Shannon Doherty passed away.
Yeah,
so she obviously cannot come back, and Kevin's not gonna dishonor her memory. So I think he said he was gonna retool it just a little bit, but then hopefully they can start filming, because I'd love to see that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Jeremy, did you watch anything over the weekend?
Yeah. Well, not over the weekend. Today, I watched The Substance, which I loved. I thought it was so rad. I think you would really enjoy it just from the Shining references. There's a whole bunch scattered throughout the movie.
I heard there's a lot.
There's a lot, yeah. Like every bathroom is red. That orange carpeted hallway. There's even a scene that's shot identical to Jack in the pantry from underneath. Very cool. Dude. And the movie's batshit crazy. So like, if you gotta be cool with a lot of stuff real quick, but it's insane in the best of ways. Demi Moore, incredible. Dennis Quaid plays a nut job. Yeah, it's great. I'm gonna say Margaret Qualley, even though that's probably not how you pronounce it. She's incredible, of course. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, yeah. I really want to see The Substance just because, yeah, it looks so insane.
It is insane.
I and this may be a little spoilery, but I didn't read anything spoilery, but I did hear there's a lot of body horror, and I'm like, you know what?
Very much so.
That's fine. I want to see this movie. It looks crazy.
It is crazy.
And yeah, I've seen some like clips like on Instagram Reels and stuff of like Dennis Quaid's performance, and yeah, I'm like, dude, I'm sold. Let's do
He's
this.
nuts. Yeah, yeah, man, it's a cool movie. It makes me want to see that director. She also did this movie called Revenge several years ago that I heard was pretty good. So
I think I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I need to check that out because I haven't seen that yet. So
yeah. But well, with that being said, what are we talking about today, buddy?
So today, we are discussing Milos Forman's adaptation of Peter Shaffer's Amadeus.
I'm so happy you surprised me with this one, because I truly love this movie. I watched it on a whim on my own years ago at my grandparents' house.
Okay.
But I was just like, because I remember growing up, Mom and me used to watch VH1 a lot, and we used to watch the nostalgia shows, you know, like I Love the 80s.
Yes. Obsessed.
And they did a whole segment on Amadeus, and you know how around that same time Falco released Rock Me Amadeus, and
that's right.
And so I'd always had that in like my brain of this movie called Amadeus. And then I was at my grandparents' house one day, and I think it was playing, or I really don't remember how I watched it, but I was like, you know what, sure. I'm pretty sure it's the first movie I ever saw with boobs. But I was just amazed at how the story was told, the acting. And I was just like, this movie's great. And then when I met Ashley, I was like, you know what? I really want to show her this movie. I think she would like it. And I timed it when I rewatched it, 18 minutes. She only made it 18 minutes into the movie. And then Stanzi tells Amadeus, that's stupid. And she was like, no, turn it off. I don't know. They wouldn't have talked like that. And refuses to watch it now. So
damn, that's a real shame because it's very good.
Yeah, I agree. After I finished it on Saturday, I told her, I was like, I really wish you would have watched this with me. I think you would have really enjoyed it.
Yeah, if you can get past that, I mean, which I mean, we'll probably discuss a little bit of it because it's an interesting view on an adaptation or even an interesting take on a historical fiction. But yeah, the first time I saw it, I was in college.
Okay.
I don't remember why I wanted to watch it. I'd probably just like, well, let's give this a shot. And I honestly, I thought I was going to be bored. I thought I was going to put it on. I'll, watch a few minutes of it and be like, okay, it's, very highbrow and, very, this critically acclaimed stuff that, I'll probably, that people pretend to like, but really it's just boring, Yeah. And it starts, the music is loud and intense, and then, Salieri has slit his throat open, and I go, all right. All right, what's going on here? And it didn't even dawn on me that they weren't speaking in the correct cadence or vernacular that they would at the time. That didn't even dawn on me. I was immensely entertained. And, I'm looking stuff up about it. It's the same gentleman who voices Quasimodo. So I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
He's also in Animal House. That matters.
Oh my God, that's right. He is. Yeah. Oh my God.
And I loved it. I loved every moment of it. I'm like, this is incredible. Where's this movie been?
Yeah.
Everywhere. What's that?
Well, and just like as I guess tease for what we're about to talk about, I love how this movie handles a lot of some historical fact of Mozart's life. And it's just, being in orchestra, I learned a lot about that. And yeah, like the final 10 minutes of of the whole thing with Requiem, I was like,
Mhm.
this is blowing my mind right now.
Well, you can fill us in because I don't know anything about his life. The only reason I know his full name is this movie.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no,
and yeah,
I'd
so
always known him as Mozart until this movie.
and Antonio Salieri, I'd never heard of him at all. And I guess that's sort of the point. But um, apparently, this movie resurged his
His
music a little bit,
Yeah.
which is nice. Uh, but
Yeah, and in case everyone you haven't figured it out, because Jeremy just said it too, this is a historical fiction and an adaptation. Obviously Mozart obviously was a real person, but so was Salieri, but this rivalry was not real. But
no, it's my understanding that Peter Shaffer just made it up.
well, honestly, it works though.
Oh, of course. Of course, we'll talk about all that. But I
Yeah.
think his intention, because they did know each other, Salieri
Mm-hmm.
tutored Mozart's son in music. So it's not like they weren't completely unaware of each other. And it's not like that they, weren't making music at the same time. But the rivalry is sort of made up.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy,
Yeah.
with that being said, I think we've beat around the bush enough.
Yeah.
Try, if you can,
Yeah.
to hit everyone with that synopsis.
It'll be fast. So the film Amadeus is told predominantly in flashback, with Antonio Salieri telling his story of his life with Mozart to a priest at an insane asylum. He has blamed himself for Amadeus's death and has tried to kill himself because of the guilt. I mean, 30 plus years afterward, but who cares? And so the film just follows the life and the rivalry of making music in Vienna, between Salieri and Amadeus. That's it. That's the story. So nailed it.
Well, and now where would you like to begin? I mean, truth be told, I could talk for 10 plus hours of the performances in the movie. Obviously of F. Murray Abraham and Tom Hulse.
Of course.
And I feel like there was another actor, Jeffrey something.
Yeah, whoops.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I completely forgot he was in this movie,
yeah.
and then his name showed up, and I was like,
oh, that's right. He's the king. Oh Jesus.
Oh my god.
Oh. Yeah, honestly, I want to kind of start out with just overall sort of big picture things to start out with, because I think what I love most about this film is the fact that it takes historical figures,
mm-hmm.
and whether or not this guy actually believes there was a rivalry or not, it doesn't matter, because what he's done is he has created a story using these two gentlemen, these titans of their industry, and has created a story that pits against each other the idea of complete devotion, passion, and determination versus God-given talent and just being gifted without the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having that story end up with being gifted sometimes is just better. Like, you cannot beat just being gifted.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter how much you work, how much devotion you have, how much passion you have, sometimes it's not enough. And that is soul crushing. And it's so interesting that you would create a story that way, because I think that if you were to pit, these two opposing ideas against one another, film and story tends to favor hard work, devotion, and passion, where people who are just naturally gifted, who don't work for it or who don't seem to work for it, tend to, fall, by their own hubris. But not this time. And I think that's really interesting. And it's fascinating because you have such perfect. Now, okay, you have at least one perfect example of it, which is Amadeus, Mozart. But I don't know anything about Antonio Salieri, so I don't know if he really did just, have to work his way, from the very bottom and work his way to being an accomplished composer. I don't know. I think it would probably be true, because no one is so naturally gifted and, becoming a child prodigy like, Mozart. So you would just assume that no matter what, whomever else is being a composer, they didn't just naturally be good at it. They weren't composing full operas at the age of 5.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's one of the elements of the film that I love, is, this really pessimistic view of art and of the artist, which I think is really interesting. And also, just I like the juxtaposition between the two of them. I like that there's such resentment and jealousy and hatred, um, coming from Salieri, because it's just not fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair that this child, this immature, debaucherous, he calls him, what does he call him, like a beast, or
The creature.
a creature, that, he gets all of this talent and all of this notoriety, because the one thing Antonio Salieri wants more than anything is immortality. And he hates that Mozart is going to achieve immortality. When he
Mm-hmm.
plays that tune for the priest, and immediately knows what it is. It's it's something in Salieri that you can just see that he's just like, yeah, because Mozart achieved immortality. He's been dead for 30 plus years, and I just played these few chords, and you know exactly what song it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I was just reading, Peter Shaffer wasn't too far off when he came up with this idea. Apparently, because again, I just read it live on camera. Apparently, rumors were circulating after Mozart's death that there was this bitter rivalry between them. But apparently, it was disproven, because people thought Salieri poisoned him, but then of course his cause of death was not poisoning, so
Right.
the rumors quickly dissipated. But yeah, Salieri's music was disappearing, not due to Mozart. Apparently, just it. I think the staying power of Salieri's music just didn't have the same oomph as Mozart's.
That's a technical.
I mean, well, and I was gonna say something even more pretentious, but I was like, nah, I'm not gonna. I was gonna say the whole, je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais.
But no, I do love that we do get this fictionalized rivalry, because, like you just said it perfectly, that these guys, even for Salieri's mediocrity, as the film blatantly says, he still understands music. He knows how to write music. I love music. I loved being in an orchestra, but you couldn't tell me how to. If someone were to say, "We'll pay you $1 million, just write a page worth of playable music," couldn't do it.
Nah.
So Salieri is talented in a way,
Yeah.
but not on the level of Mozart. And I like what you're saying, that again, as the film shows us, Salieri kind of really goes through the stages of envy, jealousy, and then eventually, anger underneath all of this, because he does feel like he's owed something, especially considering the movie establishes very early on that he chooses to dedicate his entire life to God. Just bless me with talent and I will honor you in return. And then he sees Mozart, who's, literally oozing with talent, and he's the polar opposite of Salieri. And I love the film. This is how Peter Shaffer and Milos Forman wants to tell this story. That's something I really love, is that, like, because again, I'm going to use another term, pride cometh before the fall. That Salieri really lets his pride overcome this, and his supposed deservedness of talent that he thinks he's owed.
Yeah. Because so through a lot of the movie, in the way I'm seeing it and the way I'm interpreting what I'm seeing, is that a lot of it seems to be one-sided. A lot of it seems to be just Salieri, just like he loathes Mozart for his talent. Mozart couldn't care less about, he is aware of him, but much like he's aware of the other composers. If anything, Mozart kind of likes Salieri in a way, he's like, he knows that he's better, so he has no reason to hate Salieri,
he kind of, how I rewatching it this time, it seems like Mozart knows when to put him in his place. Like, look, I like you, but you're not going to step to me. Like with the whole when Mozart's agreeing with the emperor about writing an opera in German, and he's like, well, why would you want to? Well, for love. And Salieri's like, yes, us Italians, we don't know anything about love. And then he just immediately, well, I don't think you do. And I think it's again, I think it's a keeping him in his place, not to drop him down a peg, but to be like, look, we're composers. I respect you at that level, but we are not the same.
No, because Salieri will, even if he doesn't agree with something, he will side with the person in power to, number one, keep his position as,
court composer.
And also to show his loyalty to, whomever's above him. And Mozart doesn't need to do that because he's so talented. And so because he's so good, and people will go and see whatever he does and listen to his music, that he can push back. He has that luxury of being able to push back against the authority figures, where Salieri doesn't. He's not as talented, and so he's not as gifted. Therefore, he doesn't have that luxury. And I think, I don't know if either of them are even aware of that, but I think that's sort of where Mozart gets a little perturbed with Salieri, is whenever, Salieri sides with the king or whomever it is. Anytime Mozart's wanting to do something new and innovative that goes against the king's wishes or whatever.
Yeah, well, and rewatching it this time, I really like what you said about it being one-sided, because all of Salieri's scheming Mozart never knows, Mozart never picks up on the fact that Salieri's scheming against him, but also, Salieri's essentially playing two ends against the middle, telling Mozart one thing and then running and telling the emperor the other thing, and Mozart till the end never picks up on the fact that Salieri's really been against him the whole time, and humiliates his wife just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, what was the point you were making?
I was just saying that it's another layer, I think, of the differences between the two of them in terms of talent, and the level of talent is the luxury of being able to be new and innovative and whatever.
Yes. Okay, yeah. That's why I was like, why did I chime in with that? But yeah, no, you're right, because, and that's another thing that Salieri's afforded himself, is this sort of position of power where he can be in the emperor's ear or be in the other guy's ear about, like, well, hey, Mozart's doing this.
Yeah.
And I think it's because he already, and I may be getting ahead of myself with the flow of our show, but he already knows that the other two Italians on the court do not like Mozart.
Mm-hmm.
I think Salieri loves his music, and that's why he kind of plays Mozart. But I definitely, with this rewatch, I was like, yeah, he's using these other Italians' dislike for him through and through,
yeah,
to kind of, continue with his scheme.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah,
I just really like the idea of, I can't get over just how perfect it all fits together. This idea of telling this story of mediocrity versus gifted, devotion versus God-given talent, and talent wins. I think that's crazy, and it being told through the eyes of someone who is just so envious and so angry that he has done so much for his passion, and it just doesn't pan out.
Yeah, I was telling you about this video I watched after I finished the movie, and they brought up a good point. And again, I kind of said it a little while ago about Salieri's pride. That he's so prideful and so blinded by this whole, well, God, I gave all this devotion to you. You were supposed to return the favor. Instead, and again, I'm glad they didn't write the movie like this or write the play like this. But, he could have been like, you know what? I recognize the superior talent. Let me help him. Let me, if Salieri really was so bent on devotion to God, he could have helped Mozart. And honestly, I don't think Mozart would have had an early death. And I think Salieri would have been a little bit more well remembered. But as we've already been talking about, his pride wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
And I don't think, as you just said, he couldn't have pushed back to help Mozart. No. I mean, maybe he could have. We'll never know. But the fact that he was so blinded by, like, okay, well, God, since you're not holding up your end of the bargain, then fuck you. I'm going to do it myself. And I'm taking Mozart with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I love that. Also, under all this disdain for Mozart, Salieri can't help but love his music. You know,
Yeah.
it's like it's a double-edged sword for him. I hate this man, but look what he's done. Listen, like when he's reading his original copies, and they're, as he goes to the next piece, it changes. And I love F. Murray Abraham's reaction to that, because I think it does sum up how Salieri has these conflicting feelings about Mozart, about this love and passion for his music, but this disdain for the man himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, he feels like Mozart isn't deserving of the talent. He feels like he is, which,
mhm.
I mean, only because that he decided to give up everything. No one told him to do that.
No one said, hey, if you want to be a talented composer, you have to give up your chastity, you have to give God, you have to help the poor, you have to do all this stuff in the name of God, and then you'll be talented.
That's not, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not how it works. He, he put in the work and he put in the time, but he feels that because he's made all these sacrifices that he himself put upon himself,
Mhm.
that he is more deserving. And that's just, that's a fallacy. That's wrong. That's not, that's, you did that. You did that to yourself.
Yeah.
And Mozart, he doesn't sacrifice anything.
Except for his life.
Definitely right.
Um, okay. So I want to splurge just for a second. I want to talk about Tom Hulse for
Sure.
like
Is that how you
3
pronounce
days
his last
straight.
name?
I believe it's Hulse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hulce.
Mm-hmm.
Which for our deep cut references out there, when we had our buddy Alex's daughter on Alba,
Yeah.
we talked about Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Tried.
I showed Mom that episode recently, and she was like, "Where's the video?" And I was like, "I lost it. I kept the audio." She was like, "What do you mean you lost it?" I'm like, "I don't know. When I was editing the episode, it was just gone." So, yeah. Anyway, I love Tom Hulse. I think he, especially in this role, I mean, I think he was very deserving of, because I believe him and F. Murray Abraham were both nominated for an Academy Award.
I can look that up.
But I think he was very deserving. He plays Mozart as, honestly, a man child, but also sort of a conflicted man child. Like when we get these moments of stillness with him, when it's just him, there's obviously a lot of pain and a lot of not being good enough, like when he's writing the Magic Flute, not the Magic Flute, the Marriage of Figaro, and he's so focused on the opera, and he's so, and I love the fact that he's using the billiard ball as sort of like a timer. Like, once it gets back to my hand, I should have X amount of notes written, and I think Tom's performance is fantastic. I am a little disappointed he's retired from acting, but I mean, you know what? Honestly, if this is going to be his legacy, I'm glad we had him when we did.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, his performance is great. He's there are moments where he's actually playing the piano. A lot of it is like it's playing in the background and he's just, miming. But he did learn how to play the piano. He is playing it when he's playing it upside down. At that point, he is.
I did read. Yeah, I did read that. I think he's a composer now.
Oh,
he retired from acting, and I believe he just composes things now, I believe.
Huh. I did not know that. Honest to God. What is his last?
A producer. My bad. He's been producing.
Oh, okay.
Broadway shows.
Ah. Um. Yeah. The last movie he was in was Jumper, so that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I read that and I was like, who was he in Jumper? I've seen that movie multiple times.
Have you? I don't think I have seen it that many times. Yeah, no, he's incredible. I'm a huge fan of his. Of course, as Quasimodo, he is the voice and singing voice.
Mm-hmm.
Quasimodo, so that was really cool. F. Murray Abraham is astounding. He's so good. He won. Okay, so I did look it up. They were both nominated, but F. Murray Abraham won the Academy Award.
I didn't know you could two actors from the same movie could be nominated for the same award.
They were. So
very, very interesting.
well, because this one's interesting because they are both leading roles technically.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly don't know how they determine that. I don't know if it's screen time or if it's like, significance to the plot. I don't know. But yeah, so they were both nominated, but If Murray Abraham won, well deserved. He gives such a great performance of, you're right, just such a roller coaster of emotions from jealousy to anger to resentment to respect to admiration, all within the same scene in most cases.
Oh yeah.
Especially when he's, like you said, looking over Mozart's his music. First off, the sound design in those scenes are so good because he's reading it, and my brain doesn't work this way, but I'm really glad that the movie is sort of showing us how he's experiencing the music as he's reading it, that he can hear it and how beautifully composed it is and how perfect and how well structured and blah blah blah. I like that they're playing the music in the background. That's a nice touch. Yeah, I'll never understand. Someone can just look at a piece of music and know how it sounds. I don't get that.
Again, I being from orchestra, I can't do it anymore because after we graduated high school, I stopped playing the violin. So I don't know how to sight read anymore, which is being able to read the notes how it is. But I used to, but I couldn't know how that sounded in my head,
Yeah.
Like once I played it on my violin, I'm like, oh, okay, that's how it's supposed to sound.
Right.
But yeah, which again is another indication that I love this subtle way in the film of Salieri knows his stuff, but still not as good as Mozart.
No, he's good, but he's not that good.
He's not great.
Mozart proves this twice. When the king is playing Salieri's composition,
March.
yeah. And then of course he builds upon it and makes it so much better and more complex and just better, I guess, in a way. And then at the Masquerade, when by the way, this might be embarrassing, so I'm going to preface this with I probably should be embarrassed by this. I know about that scene from Family Guy. That was the first time I had ever seen where Stewie is playing the piano and Peter's got the mask and goes, play Peter Griffin,
He's a challenge. So, okay, that memory just came flooding back.
Yeah.
That's what got me to watch the movie. I'm like, okay, what the fuck are they referencing? I need to find this movie yesterday.
Yeah.
Because I found it so funny, especially with the cutaway of the whole, because they tweaked the words from the actual movie, but the whole it wasn't Mozart mocking me, it was God.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's the first time I'd ever I guess without knowing it, knowing anything about that movie was probably through that episode, and of course that scene.
What? Hang on. What an obscure reference in a Family Guy episode.
Well, I guess
Like,
it did win Best Picture, so I mean, it couldn't be that obscure, but
well, yeah, that's true.
but at least the writers, at Family Guy watch, sophisticated.
How much you want to bet one writer was so proud of that they went to Seth and was like, "We got to put this in." And Seth was probably like, "Yeah, okay."
Well, of course, Seth's a music guy. But yeah, so that's embarrassing. But yeah, in that scene as well, he puts him in his place, knowing it was him or not. I don't think he clocked who said it. Play Salieri. But
I want to believe he didn't. I want to believe he didn't know who it was.
I don't think he knew it was Salieri. No.
Because also, because Salieri doesn't disguise his voice when he's, beginning his mental torture of Mozart either.
Right.
So you would think that Mozart would be like, I know that voice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to believe he didn't. He just heard someone say it and looked in the general vicinity and was like, yeah, okay.
So here's another confession I have.
Okay.
I think near the end of the film, when Salieri is doing this sort of weird mind game with Mozart, I think it's far-fetched and I think it's a little silly. I don't love it.
Okay.
It's fine. It doesn't really bother me that much, but I'm like, yeah, this is kind of weird. I don't know.
I could see that. I could see what you're saying. I think it I can see why you would say that. I'm down with it because he's using obviously Mozart's grief of losing his father against him. And I think Salieri knows somewhere deep down Mozart's already pretty broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I can exploit that.
Right.
And he's not, well, and also he's coming to him as an anonymous benefactor. So, he's not coming to him as like, I'm a ghost, which I'll be honest, the first time I watched the movie, I thought that's what he was trying to get across. Like I'm the ghost of your father, know. Now watching it again, I'm like, oh no, he even says an anonymous benefactor would like to contract you for a piece. So, but he's using the mask that his father wore. And honestly, I think it's a good plan.
Okay.
I think this level of mental torture is a great plan.
Yeah.
Because clearly the man is...
Mozart is already under a lot of tremendous pressure. A lot of stress, especially financially. They're insinuating that he is, going broke. I don't know if the real Mozart ever was broke. I don't know how that worked back then.
I don't think he was well off, but I don't think he was broke.
Seems weird, but I guess it makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think he was broke. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know a whole lot of his life, like of everything, but I do know that that there were some things that were fact in the film that they tweaked just a little bit. So yeah, I don't think he was entirely broke, but I don't think he was like rich,
I see. That's very strange to me, but whatever. Yeah. I was gonna say something. Oh well, I guess this is a good segue talking about what's true and what's not. So this is a very interesting adaptation style where we're speaking sort of in a modern way.
Uh-huh.
We aren't speaking in the traditional cadence or vernacular of someone from that time. We're not doing accents either, which I appreciated because I don't want to hear F. Murray Abraham do an Italian accent, and I also don't want to hear Tom Hulse do
A German
a German
accent.
accent, yeah, or an Austrian accent wherever he's from. He's from Vienna.
Yeah, Austria.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to hear that. But it also didn't take away from my enjoyment of it. I can see why it would to some. I think a lot of people like authenticity and accuracy when watching a movie like this. But in this case, it's historical fiction anyway. So we can push it a little bit further than like a straight biopic or a historical sort of a film like, well, I'm not going to give you an example because I can't think of one off the top of my head. But I did appreciate that no one's doing accents and no one is, I don't mind that people are saying stupid. I don't mind that people are using modern terminology, and that doesn't bother me. However, so Haley was sitting next to me watching this, and she said something really interesting, and it was something that I had noticed before, but I had never put a term to it, and I had never put in that much thought to it. But I always thought that let me see if I can get her name right. Elizabeth Berridge, who plays
his wife,
Constance. Yeah. She has a very modern face. Haley described it as she has an iPhone face, which is a modern term that means a face that knows what an iPhone is. And I agree. I always thought that she seemed a little out of place. Just because she looks like, she just got back from the mall.
Okay.
She also seemed very young as well, which probably had something to do with it. I don't know how old she was during the filming of this, but yeah, it always struck me as odd that because no one else kind of seems like that, but she definitely did. Despite even the modern way of speaking and all of that, she seemed even more modern than 1984 to me. But
yeah, can I be honest?
Yeah,
I was madly in love with her.
Sure.
After seeing the movie, and then I rewatched Hidalgo years later. She's in it.
Didn't know
and I'm not trying to say she aged poorly.
Oh, she looks very
but
good.
you could tell that she had aged obviously since then, and I was just like, oh, okay.
She looks very, very different than how she looked in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to say that she aged poorly or anything.
It's mostly just it's her face isn't as round anymore.
Do you think it's because her age finally kind of caught up to her face?
I think so. Yeah, because that's why she looks so young, as her face was so round. Probably.
But yeah, I was, after seeing this movie, I was madly in love with her.
Of course.
I was like, oh my
god. I agree.
Because I just thought she was very cute.
Yeah,
and
I don't mind it.
But yeah. Yeah, I read, especially with the accents, because you mentioned the accents, that Milos Forman didn't want them focusing on accents. He wanted them focusing on the performance, which I love. And it seems to be kind of a thing with Milos Forman, because let's look at another biopic he did later on, Man on the Moon. The performances in that movie are, again, on another level.
Yeah.
I mean, they made a whole documentary about Jim Carrey's method acting.
Yeah.
So I really love that Milos was like, look, we're going to drop the accents, focus on the performance, focus on the character, and just speak normal. Speak like you normally would. And I think you're right. It adds so much because, again, it's historic, like you just said, it's historical fiction. So we can push that even further if we wanted to. But I'm glad that Milos kind of knew where the line was. Like, this is where we're going to keep it. But don't worry about accents. Don't really worry about speaking like they would speak, with thys and doth,
Sure.
no, that's medieval time. But still,
Still.
I'm glad that he didn't want to focus on that. He just talk, because I think it also adds to this whole the story that they're telling of this rivalry. And I think it would become too much of a drama piece. And I mean, it is a period piece and it is a drama, but I feel like it would be too.
No, it'd be a little too
like
theatrical. I agree. A little too performative. One of my favorite shows that's come out in the past, I don't know, 20 years or something like that, is Chernobyl.
Okay.
And it was created by Craig Mazin. And Craig Mazin, who is amazing. I'm sure you've seen some of his other stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm patiently waiting for The Last of Us Season 2.
Yeah. Craig Mazin decided very early on, while writing Chernobyl, that actors perform accents at times instead of performing character. And so he just said, absolutely, we're not doing Russian accents. It's going to take away from it. The actors will get distracted by trying to get that right, that they need to focus on getting the character right. And so it's exactly the same thing. And I guess in a more recent example, is Joaquin Phoenix's performance in Napoleon, where he just does his voice, which is interesting. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, it's. I don't know why I have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it, I guess. But to me,
but you kind of have a problem with it.
I don't know, because it's just interesting. It's an interesting direction to take with that one, and I can't articulate why. That one should give me pause, but this one doesn't, because it's like it's the same thing,
Yeah.
Because in either movie they wouldn't even be speaking English, so who cares? But
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, and again, I like what you just said about it being too theatrical. If they had done that, I think it would have been too theatrical. I think it would have taken away from Salieri's scheming. I think it would have taken away from the drama of this rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that being said, I was gonna say this earlier on or later. I hadn't decided, but I was just gonna go ahead and say it now. Apparently, they are doing a TV show based on the original play from Peter Shaffer. Our boy Paul Bettany is going to be Salieri.
Interesting.
It'll be on, I think, BritBox or one of the British networks, which means it won't get over here until after it's completed.
Interesting. Now, I don't, and I probably should have done research, but I didn't. I was watching my baby all day. But I guess I should have looked up the differences between the play and the movie, because I'm sure there are some. I wasn't even going to touch differences between historical events, because to me it doesn't matter. I'm not here to talk about the accuracy of the historical events.
The only thing I would say that was really historically accurate, as far as I know, now literally while we've been talking, I've been trying to find evidence of it. I couldn't, so I guess it must have Mandela affected myself. But
that could happen.
But Stanzi locking Requiem in a cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
What I initially remember reading was that was true. that she kind of saw it as sort of like a plague and locked it away. But like I said, now I can't find any evidence of that ever happening. So maybe it was just for artistic purposes. I would say, truthfully, then the only thing that is historically accurate is the fact that it wasn't finished. It still was not finished when Mozart died. I mean, yes, the movie likes to show that they finished it, but I still don't think they finished it for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in context of the movie, I still don't think it was finished.
Sure.
Because it wasn't officially finished for another year.
Yeah.
And then it was completed by one of Mozart's contemporaries. But
Interesting.
as far as I know, I think that's the only real historical thing, because I don't know a lot of like the ideas behind Mozart's operas, like Don Giovanni being an allegory for his father.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, and I agree with you. Like, I think it would take away if we knew the differences. Because if I wanted to watch a true fact for fact something on Mozart, then I would just watch a documentary.
Well, here's how I like
to
think about it. I like to think about it this way, that what Peter Shaffer is doing is he is telling a story about someone who has dedicated their life to something and has poured everything and sacrificed everything for it, but is still not as good as this person who didn't have to work for it. And he found something that fit it. And that's how I like to think about it, because I think this story trumps the figures themselves. I think the story is really the star of the show. I think that's what makes this movie interesting at all, is the idea of putting your whole soul into something just isn't enough. Which again is very pessimistic, but it's, sometimes it's true.
Yeah. I just realized we hadn't mentioned something that's also happening throughout the film, which is, we're being presented the story through flashbacks, and Salieri is telling this story to a priest who's visiting him at the
asylum.
Sorry, I was like, because they wouldn't have called it, probably psychiatric. Anyway, asylum. Since, as you said at the top of the show, Salieri tried to commit suicide, so they sent this priest, I guess, to, ease him of his sins before, sure, I guess, he tries to kill himself again. And what I like about these flashbacks is how you can tell that Salieri's story is really, and especially at the end, shakes this priest to his core.
Yeah.
Now I don't know if the movie was trying to say that Salieri, makes him doubt his faith, or maybe it makes him realize how broken this man is by the end of his story. I don't know. Especially because he looks so horrified when Salieri tells him his master plan of getting Mozart to write this beautiful piece of music, and then I'm going to kill him, and then I'm going to play it at his funeral, and everyone will know my name.
Yeah.
The priest just looks so horrified by this. I just find it really interesting that we have this essentially just kind of, the film has its own audience reacting to all of this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and of course, it's interesting that it's a priest at all, because of Salieri's relationship with God and religion. And that he never really seemed to, well, I mean, he did, but sort of turned away from it. But
I was gonna
he
say
absolutely
he
did.
definitely
He absolutely did. But it
he
took him a
definitely
while.
pulls a
It took him a while.
he definitely pulls a Gary Oldman and denounces God.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because he felt that, you know, it was getting him nowhere. That, and of course it wasn't. And it's so heartbreaking at the end where he describes himself as like the king of mediocrity. He you know is the savior of all who are mediocre.
Yeah, that's wild. Um, you know, I wanna I had this very brief thought when I finished the movie on Saturday. I was like, you know, what if this whole idea of this rivalry was actually just like the ramblings of a madman? Because, you know, when the helper at the asylum comes
Mm-hmm.
and gets him, he calls him professor
Mm-hmm.
and really treats him like he's crazy. And I had the very brief thought. I was like, oh my God, what if he just breaks this poor man and none of it's true? But then I was like, well, wait, the priest calls him Salieri.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know. It was a
No, that would
very
be really
brief thought.
interesting if he had never met Mozart at all.
Yeah.
And this was all in his head, and that he feels that, you know, there it's the same concept of this whole thing being so one-sided, except he never got close to Mozart, and Mozart didn't even know who he was or had ever met him before. I think that's a really interesting take. I don't think it's true, but I think it's a really interesting take.
Yeah. In context of the movie, it doesn't make sense
No,
because
but it is.
it's like the Ferris Bueller
Yeah,
genie situation,
it's a
you
genie
know.
problem.
Yeah. Because Mozart talks about Salieri even when he's not there, so
Right.
yeah, it doesn't make sense. Okay, there was something I wanted to add too, something that I was like, we got to talk about it, and now I can't remember.
Oh, jeez. Oh boy. I did look up the budget because while watching the movie I was so in awe of the costumes and of the set pieces and of just how, you know, big and how grand in scope it all was, and just how many people were in the shot had to be in costume. Um and it just, you know, I was like, God, that must have cost a fortune.
Mm-hmm.
$18 million. I don't know what that is in today's money, but the budget was 18 million. So
Here, let's find
you can do an inflation calculator.
Yeah, inflation calculator. Okay, let's see here.
84.
What month did the movie come out?
I know. Oh, I can probably find that out. Let's see. I'll tell you. September
of 84. Going based on October. Apparently, this specific inflation calculator can't do more than 10 million. Hang on. Here, I found another one.
Thank you.
1984. I know this is just riveting podcasting.
I know. Jesus.
Okay.
God.
That movie. Okay. So the movie would have cost in today's time. In today's money. Today's money. Hang on. Let me. $54.6 million.
That's it?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's a lot of money, obviously, but not like some of these low budgets.
It says in 40 years, that's almost a 203% increase.
I mean, the inflation's insane. But yeah, if you see a movie like this, you know, in the way it was made also, because we're not filling in people, you know, with computers in the background where, you know, people are there. In costume. and in these gigantic set pieces. I don't know if they filmed it in actual old theaters or whatever. I'm sure they had to, um, but yeah, I mean, it just looks incredible. The movie looks great, and everything just looks just amazing. I don't know. It's a cool looking movie. On top of being entertaining.
Yeah, I agree. It's you know, I was gonna try to compare it to another film, and the first movie that popped in my head was Barry Lyndon, but I actually haven't watched Barry Lyndon yet, and it's on my shelf.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, the movie it's so good.
Yeah.
Man, it's so good. Oh, this wasn't what I wanted to talk about, but it just kind of popped in my head.
Okay.
Because you talked about when Salieri is reading the music that he can hear it in his head. One of my favorite scenes, I think, with Mozart, when he's writing Requiem, he can hear the music in his head, but it takes Stanzi to kind of snap him out of it. And then I just love that the music cuts.
Yeah.
Because he's not hearing it. Just good.
There's a similar scene in the beginning where Salieri is describing the music to the priest, and it's as he's describing it, you can hear the music in real time as he's describing it and as he's saying, and then here comes the oboe, and then here comes this or whatever, and it's all coming in as soon as he says it, and it's very well timed, and I really enjoy it.
Okay, now I did just remember what we need to talk about, which is the final scene, because I remember you mentioning there's eventually respect that Salieri has for Mozart.
Yeah.
And that's at the end of the movie when he finally lets the mask slip and let his gratitude actually come out for Mozart by calling him, "You are the greatest composer I've ever known."
Mm-hmm.
And sitting there and finishing Requiem with him, it almost makes me feel like Salieri in that moment was like, I should have been doing this the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's kind of too little too late at that point.
Yeah.
And it's such a wonderful, wonderful scene of them going back and forth and bouncing off one another. I think this is the scene. I read that Tom Hulce intentionally switched a line to throw F. Murray Abraham off, to kind of like double down on the point that Salieri doesn't really know how to read music,
or he's just not as fast. I mean,
yeah.
As Salieri mentions when he's seeing his music, the originals, for the first time, he goes, there are no indications that there's been edits. Yeah, there's no indications that he has made a mistake, or that he wanted to change anything. It goes from his brain to the page perfectly the first time. So when at the end, when he's saying all of these things, and Salieri's trying to keep up, but he can't because it's he's not that fast, and it illustrates the true genius of Mozart, and that he really does just have this natural gift for it. That he just, it's embedded in his soul, the music, and so he can just hear it, and he can just create out of nothing and out of nowhere, and it's perfect and beautiful, and it fits structurally and all of that. So
yeah, man, I love the final scene of the movie. Well, not really. It's not really the final scene, but we're pretty much at the end of the movie of just them just going back and forth, and I love it because, again, just like you said, it shows the true genius of Mozart, but then it also shows this level of respect that Salieri now has for him, where it is sort of like, this is what it should have been the whole time.
Yeah,
I should have been helping him enact his vision. But yeah, too little, too late.
Too little.
Now,
too late.
I don't know how true it is that he was buried in a pauper's grave, though, but I don't know.
I don't know that either. Yeah.
And I don't want to know. because I feel like knowing the true history behind the movie, like, I don't think necessarily will change the movie, but it just,
Right.
it does. I feel like it will take away just a little bit of the mystery,
Sure. Yeah.
But with that being said, buddy, are you ready to wrap up?
Yep. Yeah, man, this movie is incredible. I just like the idea of this type of historical fiction. I like taking a interesting idea and putting real people and real historical figures in those characters, and having that be the basis. It's so good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so do I. And I meant to say it last week, but when you told me that it was going to be like a historical fiction, I don't know why, my brain went to Blonde.
I almost did. I almost picked Blonde.
That would have been a wild episode.
Yeah.
I don't think we could have posted it to YouTube. I don't know.
Should be good.
But yeah, man, I'm so glad you picked this movie. I truthfully, in my life, before rewatching it, I'd only seen it once, and I fell in love with it. And so getting to relive it again, I was just like, God, this movie's so good. And I desperately wanted Ashley to watch it with me, but I even paused it when it got to that. I was like, you only made it 18 minutes into the movie. There's still another hour and 30 minutes left. She was like,
don't
okay.
care.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, okay, cool. But yeah, man, it was really good to revisit this movie. So
for sure.
Thanks for picking it, man.
Yeah, man, of course.
Well, are you ready to hear what we're going to talk about next week?
Yeah.
Next week, buddy. I'm a little worried.
Okay.
I'm worried that next week is going to be a little bit more than I bargained for.
Okay.
Real Fall Out Boy.
Nice.
So next week we are also going to be discussing a pretty much a biopic. That I feel like this is going to be so hard, but you know what, man, we did Mirror, so I think we can do this. Buddy, next week we're going to be talking about The Color of Pomegranates.
Cool. That's exciting.
I only have 6 more movies left on my list, and before we got started, I ran to Ashley. I said, pick a number between 1 and 6, and she said 3, and I didn't even look. I wasn't going to look until we got started, and we got started, and I was like, well, here we go.
Cool.
So everyone, for the tease for next week, The Color of Pomegranates is essentially a biopic on Armenian poet Sayat Nova, I believe is his
cool. That's pretty good.
His name, but it is the thing that has interested me is that it's an avant-garde biopic where apparently they don't use conventional biopic methods, even though it is a story from this poet's childhood to his death, but apparently they don't. The director Sergei can't do that. Apparently wanted to do something different, from what I understand. From I want to say I watched a video talking about different types of biopic films, and this movie was on that list, and I was just like, all right, I'm gonna have to check this movie out. And
yeah, I learned about it from Cinefix, obviously. Are you sure it wasn't the Cinefix video you watched? Because they did one about biopics, and that was on the list as well.
It may have been Cinefix. When we ended for tonight, I may double check it, but it may have been them. But yeah, I remember seeing that video about it, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to check this out. And I was in Austin and went to Waterloo, and they had one, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take it. So yeah, next week, man.
Cool.
God, I hope I didn't just screw us.
We'll see. You know, it'll be fun. It'll. My guess is it's going to be not so much literal interpretations of this man's life, but more the feeling of what it was like during these moments of his life. I think it might be more interpretations of emotion. Is my guess.
That makes more sense.
Well, we'll see if I'm right.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode on Amadeus, and we will see you next week for The Color of Pomegranates.